Welcome to the Holiday Podcast, where we sit over homemade challah at my dining room table here on Friday afternoons. I'm your host, Tammy, priest, a Jewish follower of Jesus, and it's great to be with you again today as we talk about the intersection of the old and the new. Well, as many of you know, we are in the middle of Hanukkah, the Jewish festival of lights, and Hanukkah commemorates the victory of God's people, led by the Maccabees and their ragtag army over their Syrian occupation. And this was about 150 years before Jesus was born in Bethlehem. If you don't know the story, the nutshell version is that the Syrian king had declared himself to be a god. He pillaged the temple in Jerusalem, he put up idols inside, even a statue of Zeus in the courtyard. He'd made it illegal for God's people to worship. They couldn't study scripture or observe the Sabbath, basically any outward expression of faith. So a small group of Jews led by a family nicknamed the Maccabees staged a resistance, and they were victorious. And they immediately set about repairing and rededicating the temple, and the last piece of this was lighting the lampstand that stood just outside the veil in the holy place. And the miracle of Hanukkah is that they only had enough oil left to keep it burning for one day, but God made it last for the 8 days it took for them to gather and press enough oils to refuel it. And that's why the Hanukkah menorah has 9 candles when it's full, 8 to commemorate those 8 miraculous days. You add 1 each day. And then the shamas, the 9th candle, which is used to light the other ones. I actually talked about this special candle, the shamas, in last year's Hanukkah podcast. I think it was number 11, if you want to go back and watch or listen. But today there's a different side of this that I wanted to share about. So one rule about lighting these Hanukkah candles is that they have to be real fire, not electric. Now, lots of people have electric menorahs. I especially remember them in people's windows in Brooklyn, in my grandparents' neighborhood, those little vintage ones with the giant light bulbs. Those are okay for decoration, but you have to use real fire when you light the candles for the actual ritual. And this isn't some arbitrary rule. The reason is that kindling the candles or the oil is the Hanukkah worship. Kindling the flames is the actual act of worship, because we're basically channeling the step of faith the Maccabees took when they lit the ancient lampstand. We're joining them in their declaration of faith. So what do I mean that the Maccabees needed to have a step of faith to light the lampstand? Why was that so hard? Why was it such a big deal? So I want to read to you what God commanded about the giant golden lampstand in Leviticus 24. The Lord said to Moses, "Command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of pressed olives for the light, so that the lamps may be kept burning continually. Outside the curtain of the testimony in the tent of meeting, Aaron is to tend the lamps before the Lord from evening till morning, continually. This is to be a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. The lamps on the pure gold lampstand before the Lord must be tended continually." So this lampstand was to never go out. And the reason is that it represented God's actual presence, which again I talked about in that episode last year. But the Maccabees knew that based on the amount of oil they had, the flames would go out in one day, which would break God's command and really seem to negate and deflate really the victory and rededication. But they felt compelled to kindle the lamps anyway, because they wanted to declare that God was victorious and that He and His light were very much present. Well, we know that they went ahead and decided to light the lampstand even though they didn't think they had enough fuel to keep it going. And we know that God made that little bit last. That's the miracle. Well, some ancient rabbis said that the greater miracle wasn't that God made the oil supernaturally last the 8 days. Instead, they said that maybe the greater miracle was that the Maccabees had that leap of faith to light the little bit of oil and trust God. So I remember when I first read that commentary with that statement, it immediately made me think of the child who offered Jesus his little lunch of fish and bread to feed thousands of people, which wasn't enough to feed 12 disciples, let alone the crowd. But as we know, Jesus gave thanks, broke the bread, and passed it all around. And the not enough in the hands of the Messiah became abundantly more than enough, right? They had left over. And I think we've all had those moments and those seasons when we feel like we just don't have enough, especially over these last couple of years. Not enough strength to walk the difficult road in front of us, not enough resources to meet our family's needs, not enough rest, not enough hope on difficult days, not enough grace or peace. But God is an expert in taking our far too little and turning it into abundantly more than enough. Sometimes He grows what we already have, like He did with the Hanukkah oil and the loaves and fishes. And sometimes He helps us understand and rediscover that what we do have is enough to sustain us and even to grow us in this season. And so either way, we can thank God for what we have and trust Him with it, like the Maccabees with their little bit of oil and the child with his little lunch. They offered the little bit they had before they knew that they'd have enough. And that was the miracle of faith that the rabbis were talking about. So when I'm dealing with something where I feel like I don't have enough, totally tapped out, I try to follow their example. I try to commit to God what little bit I do have, whether it's something material or relational or emotional or spiritual, and watch Him do immeasurably more than I can ask, and often in ways I'd never expected or imagined. And I pray that for all of us on this Sabbath Eve, especially during this time when we're lighting the candles of Hanukkah or of Advent, that no matter what kind of moment or season we're walking through, let's really ponder the act of kindling the light as a symbolic act of taking the little bit we have, often in the darkness, in a step of faith towards Jesus, the light of the world, and that we'll find that our not enough in the hands of Jesus can be abundantly more than enough. So light and faith to you, my friends, on this Challah day.